Property Owners Who Rent organization, and with us we have, I'm delighted to have our superstar, Betsy Ferguson, and Joe Rollman, sorry. And they're going to talk to us today about gardens and lake health and how we can support that system, which is very near and dear to us. So without anything else, I'll turn it over to Betsy.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. So I just wanted to make sure I do have the right audience where I'm going along with things. This is for the bulk property owners who rent, right?
Correct.
Okay. Well, either way, if you're a property owner, it's the same information, just something to think about with your landscape as a rental landscape. I mean, ease of maintenance is going to be your key thing, whether you're doing the maintenance or you're having somebody come in to do the maintenance for you. I'll kind of go through a few things, some tips and little tricks and other plants. And also, if you think about your landscape, I know when I was house hunting, I mean, I'm a gardener at heart. Obviously, that's my occupation too, but that was even before I had this job. And here I am looking, I'd go house hunting, and the first thing, I mean, they always talk about curb appeal. And same thing with renters. If they're walking around the gardens, or the gardens, walking around the grounds and looking at the houses, they're going to be, they're going to stop and look at the ones that kind of have the nicest looking landscape, or maybe you have something that's unique or different, or you can even highlight it. Stay in a house that's eco-friendly or sustainable landscaping or a butterfly habitat. Those are things that actually people will look into. I know I did an Airbnb with my family this past year, and even on those type of sites, you can list those, and people are interested in finding out and staying in places that are making a difference. And it's amazing the simple little things that we can do on our own properties here in Chautauqua and elsewhere that will have huge impacts, I mean, globally. It's hard to think of something so small, like choosing what plant you're gonna put can make a global impact, but it really can. So this quote I have in pretty much every talk I give just kind of comes from the basis of where I come from. I have an educator at heart. I'm all about making sure people understand the why. Why do we do it? I train my crew. Why are we doing this? So that if you're out there and you stop them and say, oh, well, why are you weeding that way? They better give you the right answer. Otherwise, they're going to have to go through training again with me. Because we're not going to make a difference, or we're not going to do something unless we understand why, or understand it and make it kind of closer to our hearts. So why do I do it? Well, these three little kiddos right here. This was a few years ago, and it's really neat to see how they have changed. Yet we're taking the same basic photos year after year because we've been raising monarchs now for quite a few years. It's been exciting to watch our garden grow in milkweed and the kids grow in the different photos. So here they are, they're just getting all excited. This was 2 years ago now, making all sorts of weird faces. I usually get one, if I'm lucky, looking at the camera. But this is Oliver, he's my oldest. And they're still, it's just interesting to see how they are growing up, still amazed. I mean, if I had pictures of me, still amazed. And there's our youngest, Elsie. So now that was last year. And when she started, she could just barely sit up. And now she knows more about the monarch life cycle than I do. She'll even correct me, no, Mom, that's only a first instar because it doesn't have the stripes and blah. I'm like, wow. So I'm really proud of my little nerds. So I'm going to briefly touch on the principles of ecological gardening, or just doing gardening that's a little bit better for the earth. And it comes down to respecting nature's principles, not trying to force our gardens. And once you realize that if you use nature as your guiding force in your garden, gardening becomes a lot easier. It is so much easier. So it's a lot less maintenance, it's a lot less watering, plus the benefits of the colors that you can get and all of the different animals that you're helping out in turn. So you really pay it forward just by simply following nature's principles. What are they? Biodiversity. My crew gets so sick and tired of me talking about biodiversity, but as I say, they better know what it means. by the time that they're done with the training, and they do, luckily. Biodiversity is just simply variety. It's having variety in your garden, and it might not just be variety of plants. We're talking about varieties of textures, of heights, and Joe is here. If at any point you have questions on landscape design too, or if there's something that Joe wants to talk about, he can chime in. So variety is all those things. It's not just plants. It is the styles and the structures. Monoculture versus biodiversity. Down there, you've got monocultures. That means one type of crop. There's not too many bugs that you're going to find in that lawn, which is why people tend to go towards that type of lawn. There's not that many bugs. However, there's no birds, there's no butterflies, there's no dragonflies that eat mosquitoes. So that's why I like to bring dragonflies in. You look at the lawn up front here, well, the yard or the garden up front, that's diverse. There is variety like crazy in that yard. You're going to have, that's much healthier. You're going to have better soil. You're going to have better everything compared to the lawn. It can be pretty wild looking. I mean, that's just that little strip between the sidewalk and the road. So pretty impressive with the variety that they've been able to put in there. So how do we enhance it? Creating habitat. Looking at our gardens as habitats instead of gardens. You get the best of both worlds because you'll get a beautiful garden that helps out all sorts of different animals. And avoiding sides. That suffix sides just means to kill. That's what it comes down to. So something that's going to kill, a chemical, a synthetic side is what I'm really referring to. So herbicides, pesticides. So creating habitat can be as simple as just putting a couple rocks, a little bit of extra water in your garden. Heck, they went all out and put a bathtub right in their garden in the middle there. That's actually in the back of a dump truck. So they decided, why not? They can drive around, take a bath. They got bird baths, they got everything else. It's pretty impressive to show people that you really can grow anything, anywhere, if you have the right tools or the right mindset, really. Diverse habitat garden, it's, again, thinking of those layers. No longer just thinking about that front little part. How can you make your garden even more interesting? And this is something that I've learned a lot about since starting here. Because my gardening, I always focused on just those flowers and, having my little flower garden. Well, now I look at the gardens, okay, I've got my flowers, but what can I put? I almost think of it as a picture. If I'm going to take a picture of this garden, do I have a picture frame? Do I have shrubs? Do I have a tree? Do I have something that's going to be my outline? Do I have something that's going to, bring my eye to that point? I am not a landscape designer. I'm one of those persons that, okay, does that look good? Plop, plop, plop. Okay, looks all right, looks pretty good. And luckily, it's worked out. So that's why Joe is the one to go to for more of the design, key principles that you're looking for. This is something I'm excited we're going to try to build and put into the butterfly garden this year. The butterfly garden, it is one of our endowed gardens, one of our 50 endowed gardens on the spaces or within the grounds. However, it started to really dwindle in the plants. And I couldn't figure out what was happening. I kept asking the crew, are you guys ripping out these plants? Or have you guys seen bugs? Are we overwatering? Are we underwatering? Soil samples? Well, took a little bit of time, a few years. Realized it last year. There's actually a black walnut tree growing near it. So all these plants that have been looking a little unhealthier, they're ones that cannot withstand the toxic black walnut, the juglone from the black walnut tree. So those types of things, looking at your site, it does matter. So we're going to put in a little habitat because a lot of the butterflies overwinter, their pupas overwinter, and they need an overwintering site. And where we're blowing leaves out, we're taking leaves away, those are important sites for those butterflies. So if there's something that you can create, when you leave for the season or in the fall, you can have somebody just put a couple of tubes with some bamboo pipes in it or something. That's incredible what that can provide for those people. Your monarch way stations, you could list your property as a certified monarch way station. You can go on and register it. You can get a little plaque for it that you can put right in the front yard. That would be a really pretty picture on the different websites. People can go online and find your garden listed on the registry. We have several throughout the grounds now. This is up at the Arboretum. And all that a monarch way station is you saying that the garden that you have on your property is good for monarchs. It provides the host plants for the caterpillars, and it also provides a nectar source, and you're doing your part to maintain that for them. So reducing these things called sides, whenever you're adding something like a pesticide or herbicide, it's going to kill more. It's going to affect more than just the bad guys, the bad plants that you think of, or the bad bugs. So you do have to take that into consideration and be aware of the drift and the runoff, especially if it comes down to it where you have to apply something, because there are times where there's not really an alternative. Take all the steps you can before you have to apply something, but if absolutely needed, make sure that you are applying it in the right way, the right time, and that you know what whoever is applying it is also using. So what do we do instead of using pesticides? Just make sure you start with healthy plants. A lot of times, even with landscape companies, you're the ones that have to be vocal about things and let them know this isn't looking right. The landscape companies, my landscapers, my gardeners are going to go out there and look at things. They let me know. So if they say this is not looking good, what are we going to do? If you start with unhealthy plants, it's just going to open up a whole slew for disease and a big, basically a snowball. You want to bring in things that attract beneficial insects and birds. Just by planting native plants and thinking about having water in your gardens, all of a sudden that right there brings these guys in. You bring in something, a little bit of water, now you have dragonflies. And that's going to bring something that's going to help control mosquitoes. If you have something that can bring in birds, there's birds that are incredible insectivores. It's weird, but if you take away their bird feeder, then they're there to eat the insects. So at certain times of the year, you might have the bird feeders out. Other times you don't, because you want to bring them in, but then you want them to be feeding on the insects and not the bird seed, if possible. And then using repellent plants, citronella plants. Your annuals are a good place to have these repellent plants. The marigolds are a great example. And then again, if you have to use something that ends in a side, there are organic solutions we use for herbicides. If we need to spray something, it's getting out of control. Clove oils, garlic oils, rosemary, neem oils for fungicides. So there are organic solutions. And it's also, if say you have milkweed and you see it eaten all over, well, that's a really good sign. And it might help if you notice that your plants are being eaten by something. If you have renters, you might want to put a little sign, say this, this is being eaten by monarch caterpillars, or that way they're not like, ew, these gardens look all eaten and gross. It shows that you're doing your part. If you educate them, they will also pass that information on. If you have somebody maintain your property, something that is a big key, whether it's yourself or your own property that you live in or that you're renting, know what's being used on your property. Who is applying it? When are they applying it? What are they applying it? Or what are they applying it to? Why are they applying it? Don't just have them apply it because that's just how it's always been. Make sure it's something that's really needed. There are a lot of chemicals that have to be sprayed. They have a very specific time frame that they have to be sprayed in. You have to make sure that the weather is just right. It's not going to rain in 24 hours. And you don't want somebody just going there to apply things just in order to charge you money saying that they applied it. And that does happen, or so I hear. Another thing is talking to your landscapers, talking to your property managers, talking to yourselves and your family members, realizing that the base of your garden is your soil. So what can we do to make sure that soil is a habitat, it is alive, and how do we keep it alive? Nurture it. You got to feed it. You got to water it. I don't know. It's not necessarily that you water your soil. You want to keep that soil, that moisture in the soil. And then aerate your soil. All right, here's a little cartoon. I love this one. Cracks me up. Planning on aerating the lawn again tonight, Lou, and the worm's eating a bowl of chili. So kind of that fun little humor in there. What we don't realize is that those organisms that are in the soil, they need air, they need water, they need food. So when we do construction projects and when we do anything, even foot traffic throughout the summer, you have a lot of renters that are coming through. Maybe they don't have, there isn't like a designated path. Making sure that you aerate or loosen up that compaction in the fall will help both your lawn and your gardens. If they're running through, the foot traffic is actually a lot worse for trees and things because of how narrow and how much weight there is in one little central part. So if there's a path on your property that you notice, everybody just takes it, why don't you turn it into a permanent path? Stop trying to grow some type of lawn or something there. Turn it into a permanent path. That way, that is, you don't have to worry about aerating it. And then making sure we're keeping soil in its place. That is actually Chautauqua Lake. That's down by Smith Boys Marina after a big storm with Goose Creek. So this happens all throughout the lake when we have big runoff, big storm events. And Chautauqua has been doing a lot of different methods to help try to stop that soil, whether it's new storm drains that can help filter out the sediment, the rain gardens, the shoreline buffers, and anything that homeowners can do within the grounds to help this as well. Everything will get less and less of the soil, a lot less sediment, a lot less problems with the lake. So how do we do that? Well, there's a couple simple ways, mulching and ground covers. It's a pretty obvious one. If there's a big storm, you're doing something, you're digging up your garden, you're doing some big project at the house, making sure that it gets covered up as soon as possible. Raised beds and edging just to keep that soil from running out in bigger events. I was just talking about the permanent paths. And then this is a big one, deep-rooted plants, especially if you're living on hillsides, if you're living down in, or if you have any type of lakefront or riverside property, whether here or wherever you call your permanent home. And I'll talk more about those deep-rooted plants here in a couple minutes. Cornell came out a few years ago, it's probably about 10 years ago now, there's a brochure called Weed Suppressive Ground Covers. And to me, I always thought of ground covers as super low growing and just right on the ground. Well, this was a brochure that really kind of opened my eyes, where it's not necessarily something that's a real low grower. It just means it's going to grow out and it covers the ground so that nothing else really grows underneath it. And this happened to be, they tested out tons of different types of plants to see if it actually, whether they put out chemicals or they did something where it actually suppressed other weeds from growing up. So it lists a whole bunch of different plants like coral bells, lady mantle, and butterfly weed was one of those ones I would never think of butterfly weed as a ground cover, which is why I put it in here. Something that you can think of, even your perennials, if you plant them in bigger groupings, it really does work as a ground cover. So it's protecting that soil from running off, it's shading it from the stormwater. And here are the roots, and why I say deep-rooted plants. Hillsides, places you're trying to get roots down so they can filter out sediments, filter out the different, even toxins and chemicals. Here is, oops, go back. This is grass. Look how little those roots are. In a big giant storm event, they're not gonna hold very well, right? You plant a 9-bark, now you've got 16 feet. You wanna make sure that that 9-bark's there, that you don't really wanna move it every couple of years, because that's got 16 feet of growth and more if the right conditions are around. Baptisia, the blue false indigo, is a great one, a great perennial for holding on hillsides because their root structures have been known 30 to 40 feet. So, and they grow very quickly. But again, make sure that's really where you want it because you don't want to have to dig it up. You can ask my crew about that. So looking at, this whole thing is just kind of, in general, looking at our gardens differently. So how do we landscape for those different gardens? And again, that you can highlight. It's just thinking, how do our gardens link to that native landscape? How can we look at the native landscape? So as you're driving around the county, even if you like a field or you like something like a plant, stop, take a picture of it, see what it is. See if you can make your gardens have more of those native plants in there. instead of having our parks looking like this, can we add places, or even our yards, can we have something? This is in the New York Botanical Gardens. You've got places where they've been able to landscape even in the woods that are, they're not mowing anymore. Now you've got all these, you've got habitat for the salamanders, for the frogs, for everything going around in there. So let's build our community, not just in the, in the sense that Chautauqua is our community, but from the gardens up. And yeah, size doesn't matter. It really doesn't. You can have, wildflower fields. You could have, a 3-foot circle. You can even have a simple planter. It's your choices. Our choices as gardeners, as homeowners, have humongous impacts on the wildlife, on the animals around us, and even the visuals, and helping to educate others as they're walking around the grounds, because I'll snoop on all of your planters. I do. I go around, I cruise, I take little pictures, I find out. That's how I did it my first year. I didn't know plants. I knew plants, but I was never an annuals gardener. So I used all the planters that are around to figure out what types of plants work. And it helps people, again, if you're using plants that are going to impact or be beneficial to birds and butterflies, that's huge. Some landscape design tips that I've learned since being here too: painting in broad strokes, using big patches. Instead of having 3 or 4 little plants here or there of the same type, choose 3 plants in total that you just have bigger sections of in your garden. It'll have a better visual impact, and you will also have a better impact on the wildlife. The birds, butterflies, butterflies especially can see things in bigger groupings. That's how they find the different areas. So in the gardens at Chautauqua, it was a weird transition for me to go from buying 3 or 4 for my house to buying 70 to 100 for a garden. After 5 years, I'm still underestimating how many plants it takes to fill in an area, and pretty amazing when they do bloom and fill in. The amp, so here, instead of doing like 3 or 4 different types of annuals, just one giant swatch of the tangerine marigolds, and I couldn't believe, this was last year's, I could not believe the number of butterflies that were on that, and bees and dragonflies and damselflies. Really amazing to see what a difference just planting bigger groupings, how much of an impact that can have. Plus the colors, and it just, even visually, it's much more stimulating to the eye. The site, when you're thinking about your house, within the institution, especially for landscaping, there are microclimates like crazy throughout the institution. And even in our gardens, it's amazing to see what grows well in one garden might not in another, because you have places where you could probably even get up to a zone 6 or pushing a zone 7 plant because of how hot and protected those core buildings are in the center area of the institution, where if you're on the north end, south end, or you're on the hill where the wind blows off the lake, now you're looking at making sure that you have zone 3 plants because of the types of winds and the rains and the snows and everything else. So your microclimates, knowing what conditions you have right around your house, and even your north side, south side, east side, west side, those are all important. Xeriscaping, it's hard to think here about xeriscaping, but this is something I want to find an area and really make a xeriscaped garden. And that just means basically a desert garden, one that doesn't require water, and see what happens. So just 100%, it is only watered by the rain, see how it goes. And it's amazing the plants that are tolerant of really hot, dry conditions. You think of xeriscaping, you think of the desert, and you think of cactus, but butterfly weed is a great one for xeriscaping. Hot, dry, neglected, it loves you. You pay any attention to it, it won't grow for you. Cranesbill geranium is another one. I was shocked at how the conditions that can grow in, from full shade to full sun that you just ignore it in the hot, dry conditions. And then rain gardens. Is your house appropriately set up? Could you put in a rain garden? And the size and the location of your house would make a difference with this. So looking at our gardens differently, turning your green thumbs blue, that means just thinking about the water quality. How is your garden, how is your property helping protect the lake? And that is, what's a rain garden? Well, it's just a bowl-shaped garden that's gonna make stormwater slow down, spread out, soak in. Those are your 3 S's. Right? There's a beautiful view, much prettier as a frame. I talked about framing your views, using your gardens to frame your views. There's University Beach. There's the bowl-shaped. The water comes down. It fills up. There's the overflow. That was the first summer, the August of planting. That was after 1 year of planting. It all filled in. And then it just grew and grew and grew. Beautiful blooms going through there. And this is actually, I would say, talk about a xeriscape garden. Anything in our rain gardens that's growing along the border edge, you could use those plants for any type of xeriscape garden up here, because those are all ones we don't water our rain gardens at all anymore. Only when we install them do we water them. So anything that is surviving is 100% all on its own. We're not doing anything to it. And the edges of the rain gardens are your hot, dry plants, the plants that can withstand that. So if you're wondering what type of plants you can put in and neglect for hot, dry conditions, look at any of the rain gardens, the border area. So when you're doing your plant selection, it's all about right plant, right spot. There's Lake Erie, there's a palm tree. Not right. That's why the palm tree looks like that, because yeah, this was actually at a restaurant, and I said, ooh, I've just got to take a picture. I couldn't believe that one last little palm frond was holding on for dear life, but no way. That's snow, yep. Yeah, that was in the middle of early spring or late spring. We were up there a couple of years ago. So plant selection factors, what should you be requesting if you're not the one going out and purchasing? This is what you can ask, or what you want to be talking to your landscapers or the property maintenance people about. How can you make a difference? And when I was with the Master Gardener program, we were working with local nurseries to see if they would be willing to do a native plant program with us, whether they put all their natives in an area or if we just could flag them. And they did. A lot of them said, well, we'll flag what we have, but we're not going to bring in any extra plants because people just don't want them. People aren't asking for them, so we can't supply them. And I thought, well, from a business standpoint of view, I can see that. But that's where I turned to the people and I said, you have to start going into these nurseries and ask them, do they have natives? Where are your natives? And within a couple years, I was so excited to go up to Westfield Nursery last week and see the abundance of swamp milkweed and butterfly weed and all of these native plants that they had throughout this whole section. I thought, we wouldn't have seen that 5 years ago. And that's a big credit to people coming to different events, learning about what to do and wanting to make a difference. So something to think about. Can you rent your property out in the fall? Can you start renting it out in the spring? Well, I can tell you as a gardener in this area, it's pretty gloomy for that whole big section from like November till April or May, depending on the weather. So if you can put flowers that are going to bloom, plants that are going to come up early, don't just think of your house or your property as a 9-week season type of property. Is it something that you can add a couple weeks on so you can get more rental in September? September is probably one of the most beautiful months to walk the grounds. Plus it's all free for the area. So a lot of people from this area want to come in. It might even be something where a family wants to just come up and be able to stay as like a staycation that's here at Chautauqua, something different to do. Have something that blooms in that September, October timeframe, something that blooms in the early April, May, as long as the weather allows you to. Put those trees, shrubs, perennials, and even annuals in. Have those layers. And then if at all possible, choose natives first. So here are a couple natives, and this is it'll go right along with that handout I gave you. I'll talk a little bit about them real quick. So why do we use the natives? Well, they're adapted to this local climate. It's a little hard, and this is something too, if you're using native plants, making sure that the landscapers either mark the native plants so that they don't get pulled up the next spring if they're new plantings, because that's something that happens within our gardens. I have new people come in, they don't realize that the native plants are there. They kind of look like weeds at first, but they're adapted to this local climate. They won't come up till they know that it's safe to come out. They help reduce the water and the chemical use. They're usually very deep rooted. The native plants provide the food for the native wildlife. They restore our gardens into ecosystems, and they increase biodiversity. So what I am considering reliable, these are the ones that I've seen throughout the grounds that do really well with very little maintenance. They don't get a whole lot of diseases. Like right now we're getting powdery mildew on a lot of different plants. So there's some that I love, but I don't have them listed because they're not as easy to maintain. So that's why these have been chosen over others. These are the chosen ones. The columbine, a nice spring one. The wild columbine, the native one, the red one. This comes up in the spring. It'll also it can bloom again in the fall. Adds a nice little covering of leaves. You can cut it back. You'll get another little bloom later on. Blue false indigo. This is the one, and with the perennials, I'm going kind of from spring into the fall. That's the order of these. The false indigo is absolutely beautiful. I can't wait for it to bloom each spring because it kind of gives you that, yay, it's finally here, the sun is here, the plants are going to start growing. It is also a legume, which means it puts nitrogen into the soil. So it's going to add nutrients into your gardens. That means less fertilizers or other things for you. Plus, if you have kids or grandkids or family members that come through, right now they've made their seed pods. And in the fall, talk about a great shaker. You can't hear them now because the seeds are still ripening. But this is the seed pod and the Baptisia. If you like to do cut arrangements, Baptisia is another great one for greenery in your flower arrangements. So I can pass that one around just so you can see it. And it's a different color. You think of greens in your garden, but this is more of a blue-green. So when you're trying to do landscape design, that's something to think about. The Cranesville geranium, I love that one because of its ease and the fact that this thing is our longest bloomer. Throughout the grounds, this starts blooming first, usually right at the beginning of May. This year it definitely held off because it was such a cold spring here. The nighttime temperatures were horrendously cold. But this will be our last thing to keep blooming in the fall. Last year it bloomed until pretty much Halloween. That's when we cut it down. What's nice about it, you can shear it. And I have my crew out shearing the front of 394 today because it's just about spent for the first round of blooms, and we'll have a whole new flush of growth. Great for shade and for sun. The shade, it'll be a little bit leggier, but you can keep kind of clipping it back and keep it into a more bushy form. The sun, it'll get 3 feet or 2 feet tall or so, spread way out, just absolutely beautiful. And works really well in containers. So, something you can think about is putting perennials, and we've actually put a lot of perennials into our containers this year, into our planters, so that we can either reuse different places or that we're going to just overwinter and bring back out. Sustainable, much better in that sense. Anise hyssop. If you like licorice, the smell of licorice or the taste of licorice, this is the type of plant for you. Break off the leaves, put it in a little container of water and put it in your refrigerator. Absolutely delicious with just that hint of licorice. Plus, it is usually covered by all sorts of bees and butterflies. It will just bloom. If you want something that you can reseed, or it's a nice, easy one to regrow. And it's easy enough to pluck out, too. So it's not like one of those ones that if it self-seeds, you're going to have a hard time digging it out. It comes right out. And you can share it with your friends. Maybe this, I think my battery's dying. Coneflower, purple coneflower, hot, dry, keeps on blooming. Another one that will bloom right in and through the fall. Essential for our fall butterflies that visit us. But something I want, people always talk about cultivars, or you go in and you see all these really cool plants all over the place, and there's beautiful coneflowers, a lot of varieties out there. This is our native coneflower. You can see why it's called a coneflower. It has that cone in the middle. So that's our purple coneflower. If you're looking at cultivars, the key to cultivars, and if you're thinking sustainable gardens, find a cultivar that is very similar in its structure and its bloom time. You don't, sometimes they're like, oh, an early season bloomer, an early season blooming coneflower. Well, the coneflower here is meant for certain birds and bees and everything else. So you really want it in that same time frame. You don't want something blooming and being done and spent before the animals that rely on it are even here. But something I learned last year about these, because that got me. I was like, ooh, that looks so neat. I fell for the trap. I did it because they're really cool. They're really neat looking. But I found out that those are actually sterile. So the double ones are sterile. Now, goldfinches and other birds rely on these seeds for the fats that they need to overwinter places. So if we now have only double scoop type of, or these double coneflowers in our gardens, it's pretty, and the animals will still try to go eat those seeds, but there's nothing in them. It's like empty calories for them. So yes, you can put one of these in your garden, but make sure you have others that are of the, this is a cultivar. It's blooming now. It still has a cone shape. It has fertile seeds. This is another variety, another cultivar. It doesn't have as big of a cone, right? But it is blooming now. It's similar in color, similar in structure. So it's just one of those things, becoming aware of what is out there and making sure that these aren't too sharp right now. But coneflowers, you want to, if somebody's been bad, you want them to go out in the fall, give them a task to do. Boy, tell them to go collect coneflower seeds. Oh, that hurts. You need the rose gloves to do those. Swamp milkweed, another great one, a wet spot or a damper spot in your lawn. It grows to 3 feet tall. It's something that you could put in the back of the garden, a shadier area if you want to. And it stays contained and controlled. So it's not something that's going to go wild. You can have it out in full sun if you want to. You can see the bell tower. This is last year. I went down to take a picture for a monarch talk, and a monarch came and landed right on that one as I was doing it. I'm like, thank you. You got my memo. Butterfly weed is another one. Again, a weed suppressive ground cover that you wouldn't think of it as a ground cover, but that's down at the amp. You can see how it just fills out, and it's just a beautiful bright orange color. A little trick of that I didn't realize you could do with milkweeds, clip it back after it flowers. We were just clipping off the seed pods so that all the little fluff wouldn't go in through the amp. And lo and behold, by doing that, we realized that it'll actually flush out a whole new growth of blooms. So we get 2 to 3 flushes of blooms each season now off of our butterfly weed. And then in August, after it blooms in late August, that's when we let the seed pods start to form so we can go collect the seed pods and spread them everywhere else. Drive down the road with our hands open and see if it starts spreading. Joe Pye weed, it's a good one. There's varieties. The baby Joe, little Joe, those are a little bit better adapted for a smaller space garden. The big Joe Pye weed, that's like down at the amp. That's a 5 foot tall one. It does get pretty large. Purple blooms on it. Just huge attractor of the different birds, butterflies. Great blue lobelia. This is a really nice big one for the back of the garden, big tall stalks. I didn't put in red cardinal flower, which is Lobelia cardinalis. You can plant those together and they do really well together, but what you'll notice in your garden is cardinal flower likes a disturbed site. So if you plant it initially, you've disturbed the soil and it's doing well, then you might lose your cardinal flower after 3 or 4 years. It's because the blue lobelia likes that kind of landscape maintained type of setting, where cardinal flower likes it really kind of shooken up. So if you do have cardinal flower and you want to keep it growing, just kind of scratch the surface or have an area where you disturb the site every now and then, and that's a good place. New England aster, a lot of times, especially again, rental properties, don't realize the importance of those fall plants. For here, the things that bloom in October, late September, October, not only are great for us as gardeners because we're trying to still keep going and see blooms, but for the like the monarch butterfly, they have to have some type of nectar source in order to make it down to Mexico for the summer, or for the summer, for our winter, their summer, or their winter, something. It's still their winter, but it's up in the mountains there. Goldenrod, 115 different moths and butterfly species. It's the #1 perennial if you're looking for butterflies and moths to come to your property. There's a lot of varieties. A lot of goldenrod is very aggressive, but some of them are a little more controllable. Stiff goldenrod, the one on the right-hand side, is a really nice goldenrod to use. It is a taller variety. There'd be something for the back. And plus, look how cute, right? Even my dog likes it back there. Some for the shade, Solomon seal, another good one for just covering areas. Foam flower, I'm going to go through a little faster here. Foam flower and wild ginger, these are good ground cover ones for shade areas. The foam flower gives you that bloom in the spring. The wild ginger, the bloom is underneath the plant, and it actually is fertilized by, or pollinated by ground beetles and other things crawling along.
Can you go back to
The foam flower, yep. So there's a lot of, again, a lot of different varieties of foam flower out there. Just looking and seeing what time they bloom, how do they bloom, do they spread by rhizomes? Other non-native notables, I'm just putting on here things that are well controlled, things that do good for covering the soil, helping with stormwater runoff and or adding height. This lungwort, this raspberry splash lungwort was one that we trialed out at the Arboretum when we first installed it, and it's something that has really done well. One, you get the blooms of multiple colors in the spring, and then you'll have the greens over there that have all the little just variety on the leaves, the variegation, or the spots, I should say. But what's nice is you can cut that back, and you'll get all new greens. Right now we do have some powdery mildew on them, so we're going to trial just cutting it back and seeing if we get powdery mildew again. Again, that is out at the Arboretum. If you take a walk, you can see most of these plants out there. Some shrubs, downy serviceberry, great to eat the berries if you can get them. Sweet spire is another really nice little shrub that stays low, has your spring blooms, and also the fall interest as far as bright red colors. We have invasive species regulations here in New York where you cannot purchase, transport, propagate. There's a whole list of plants that you can no longer do that. Burning bush, privet, barberry. So we're trying to find replacements for those. And it's hard because you can still go to a nursery in Erie and buy these plants, but as soon as you come across that state line, you're breaking the law. Ooh, feeling like a rebel bringing a barberry into New York State. But they are, that gives us an opportunity to try new things. What are we going to use to replace these with? And that Itea is a good one for the burning bush. Button bush, this is just a fun plant. You'll see all sorts of critters all over it. And what I like about this plant with my shrubs, I don't want something that's going to take a whole lot of time to prune. If it is something that I can cut all the way to the ground if need be and it will do just fine, that's my type of shrub, where I'm going to let it grow in its normal size. And it's a lot easier to tell somebody to take the entire cane off the bottom, take that whole stem right from the ground and do that every year, find your 5 biggest canes and take them out, than it is to say, okay, prune at this little itty bitty part. But button bush is one you cut all the way to the ground, it'll go great. Summer sweet, another one, cut all the way to the ground. Really good smelling, you'll see things all over it. This is one that they have a lot of different varieties. The 16 candles variety, that's a shorter one. It stays a little bit more mounded and it kind of comes out. That's what this one over here is. The dogwoods, again, you can cut it all the way to the ground. If you have a place, if you know that you get snowplow damage at your house, this is a good one where you can cut it to the ground and you get new red twigs the next year. Fothergilla, this is one that I have come to absolutely love. It's a very slow growing shrub, which is nice because then it can stay in its kind of compact form. I like the dwarf form of it. It gives you a flush of spring blooms. It's an early bloomer, so those early pollinators have got that. And then in the fall, you get colors like that. You get that nice sunset effect. Winterberry, another great one for the birds and also for any type of arrangements. If you want winter interest, if you do rent out your property in the winter at all, something to take into consideration with your landscape. Spice bush, I'm always on the lookout for that little caterpillar. I've yet to find him, but someday I will, because that's actually his butt. That face is the butt of the caterpillar. But he turns into the spice bush swallowtail, and the caterpillar only eats spice bush. So that is why that is such a key plant. It's all through our woodland areas, so it grows really well in the shade, which is nice for your properties here, and it smells really good. If you crush the leaf, it's really nice. You get little red berries in the fall. 9-barks are really good in the sense you, again, cut them all the way to the ground if need be. There's a whole big variety of 9-barks. You've got good soil structure with the roots. Sometimes they get downy mildew, but if you keep them pruned out right, that tends to do really well. There are varieties where you have bright green like the Darts Gold. You have Center Glow, which is one that you have a little bit of, well, now he's wilting. I didn't have him in water. He looks a little sad right now. He looked much better about a half hour ago, but you can see the variety of the color in the leaves there. But as you drive around or walk around, you'll start to see these plants. Blueberries, you never think of it, but this is a great substitute for burning bush. Really good. It has such beautiful red leaves in the fall. And right now, if you go walk into Discovery Garden, help yourself. There's blueberries growing because we ripped out all the burning bush a few years ago. We started some baby blueberries to see if they would grow, and they're finally starting to take. So it was a trial run, but a little slow going, but it's going well. But a really good one, you get it a nice big shrub, and you'll have those beautiful red leaves all fall long. Calm St. John's wort, that's what's up at the front at the main gate. Another one that I like for an area that we have to cut down. So we cut those shrubs down every year, all the way to the ground. And so as big as they are right now, that's how big they get every single year. And they grow really quick with all those blooms. Then bayberry, bayberry is another great one. A good replacement for privet. And if you crush all those little berries in there, smells wonderful. The last little part, just real quick, annuals. It's just a matter of finding out. You can Google annuals for pollinators, annuals for butterflies, annuals for bees. Some of the biggest ones, you've got the marigolds. Pentas is one that I had never had heard of really before, but it's so pretty. And you see so many butterflies on it. In front of the colonnade, look in those boxes, the low-growing boxes, and you'll see pentas growing in there. Shade? It can grow in shade. They'll get a little leggier in shade. The ageratum or ageratum, floss flower, full sun, neglected, it'll love you. So I like that. Another one, lantana, full sun, neglected, does really well. And each flower head has multiple colors on it, so that's another good one. Smells almost lemony. Then your zinnias, of course, the zinnias. Again, planting them in bigger groupings will have a massive impact. The Mexican sunflower, if you can get you'll only need one plant. It'll get 3 to 4 feet tall and about the same width, but it is incredible as far as a pollinator attractor. So you can put one of those in a planter and that's it. That's all you need. And it's just a matter of remembering that whatever we do here in our gardens can have an impact to the rest of the world. I think John Muir said it best with that quote. And it just comes down to if we do a little, we really can do a lot. So just by coming here, listening to me ramble on for a while, I'm sorry, I kept going and going. I do want to open it up right away to questions and answers. If there's something that Joe wants to pop in with, or if you have questions, like I said, Joe is a landscape designer, architect with leaf and stone architecture. So, yeah.
Can you speak a little bit more to your maintenance of like perennials? What do you actually do every year?
Every year? Well, we try to, with some of them, because we have so many gardens here, we do a little more cutting than what I would normally do. My gardens at home and what I would recommend, if you can keep perennials throughout the winter and just cut them down in the spring right before, coneflowers, because so many birds depend on those seeds over the winter. Even grasses, if you can keep them through the winter and then cut them down in the spring, that's what I would suggest because it provides shelter and habitat, like a little bit of a windbreak. Other things rely on those plants too. So if you could do, I know the fall cleanup, there's a lot of animals that use the leaf litter even. But then again, you know, the problems that we're running into last fall was really cold, wet. The leaves didn't come down till really late. We weren't able to get all the leaves up. So then now we had double the duty. We had to get the leaves out and we had to prune and we had to cut things down. But if you, I mean, at home, I'll leave everything on there and then just do it all a little cleanup and kind of till in some of the leaf mulch in the spring, just a little bit.
The other thing with leaving your perennials as long as you can, is if you end up in a situation where you have a warm fall, which sometimes we do, if you cut your grasses back or your perennials back too soon, and you have a warm fall that persists, it can actually trigger phenolic response in the plants to where they'll start growing again. They won't be hardened off, so then you're more exposed to winter damage.
Yeah, it's a great point. One of the things I learned this year, we won't prune or cut back any hydrangeas after August 1st, because that if you cut those or anything that blooms on spring wood, if you cut it now, it might not have enough time to either make stuff or harden off. There's a lot of things that take a while for it to harden off. Like I said, if it's open, it'll expose it to a new flush of growth. Yeah.
Is it possible to do a monochromatic color scheme in a garden and still stay true to what you've been talking about?
I believe there, yeah, absolutely. Especially if you go in the, for me, I think like blues, there's a lot of varieties, blues, purples in that sense, that you could get spring until fall if you're looking for that. I'm trying to think what other ones. Whites, yeah. And those are, because it's weird, but if you think about all the spring bloomers and the fall blooming things, those purples and the whites and the blues, those are the things that'll come out first, and those are the ones at the end, just with the temperature-wise. I think that's what the pigments that allow them. So the whites and the blues you could definitely do. I mean, you've got all sorts of different blue grasses, the blue flowers, ground covers, even hostas, and the whites too. They even make a white hosta now. Crazy. Yeah.
Sending us the ant there last year were so beautiful.
We did a preventative fungicide spray, like a neem oil type of spray early on, but last year we didn't have as much humidity. It went right hot. It just went from like spring cold to dead heat of summer. This year I've seen a lot more humidity. Last year we really didn't have powdery mildew many places at all. The year prior we did, so that's why we had done a preventative spray with an organic, it's like a 3-in-1 organic preventative fungicide, miticide thing. And then that's, this year we have powdery mildew earlier than we've seen it in a couple of years, so. Wow.
What are the water requirements of the crane-filled drains?
The ones out front, when you come in the main gate entry in those oval beds, never watered them, ever. So it's one of those, they can handle a moist shady woodland garden, but they can also handle complete dry. It might affect the overall size or like legginess of the plant, but you could do a lot with just pruning them down too to get them in shape. But yeah, that's why I love them. They really, once they're established, and there's not much you have to do with them. So. And they bounce back if they do start to wilt. A little bit of water and whoop, right back to it.
How can the institution deal with aphids? There's a tulip tree across the street that's infested, dropping leaves. Do you deal with aphids? Or?
Yeah, when it comes to trees, it's a very hard thing to do because really the only thing you can do is a systemic injection, and with that, then you're looking at affecting other animals. So we can come out and monitor it and see just how bad it is, because yeah, once you get the aphids, then you get the sooty mold, you get that honeydew dropping down, and sooty mold. Where? North Terrace, okay. All right. So
spread.
Yeah, it might have to be where we come in and look at that individual tree, see what happens, and if need be, then we would do that.
What's the best thing to do to let you know where it is? Or
If you just tell me the address, I'll write it down right after that. Yep. Yeah, the aphids, we've got them, they're starting to come out really bad on some of our sunflower plants and other things.
Tree gardens and butterfly gardens, does the institution have a climate change plan? And if they do, are you involved in it?
Not as of yet that I know of, but that's what we are talking about with the xeriscape gardens. We want to try out different things because yes, we got a lot of rain this spring, but then a couple of years ago we had the worst drought I've ever seen in my life here. So that's what sparked us to think, okay, we need to have gardens for everything. We've got wetland gardens, but let's see if we can get onto that xeriscaping side. And that's where even going to thinking on a global scale, this year we've started to transition a lot of the places that we've normally had annuals into having perennials because it's more sustainable and it uses a lot less water. And with the issues that are going on in the lake and then global scale wise with water, we're really trying to reduce our use as far as watering goes by putting in those perennials. And so next year it'll look different throughout the grounds again because the perennials that are small in some of our containers, hopefully they'll be nice and big next year. But that's something that we in the gardens department are conscious of, and I hope that it does become even more so in the strategic plan and as we go forward too with the institution. So, definitely.
How many gardens are you responsible for?
We have over 325 garden beds. 51 of the spaces themselves are endowed, which means there is money there to support them. They are memorial gardens. The other areas around the buildings, some of our public buildings, those are not considered endowed, but they're just within a general gardens budget. So altogether, 300, well, I didn't think about the new Oddlands Plaza area. So we're up over probably close to 400 garden areas now that we maintain. And all the lawns we do with the gardens too. So yeah, I'll tell it to the crew. Yeah, we've got one of our biggest crews this year. We had a lot coming in the last couple weeks, so it's been really nice, and hopefully they come back in May. Our crew goes from April through November as we do all the leaf pickup and stuff too.
If we're walking around the amphitheater and see a weed, do you do it where we go in and get all the root, or we shouldn't pull weeds?
You can pull all the weeds you want to. Go ahead. Yep. No, just make sure you get that root. Yeah, that's one of the things that we do with the training is just talking about the importance of making sure you're getting the whole root instead of just clipping off that top, because otherwise you just do medusas or you make them stronger because, it's the same purpose as deadheading. You deadhead a flower in order to make it grow more and get more flowers. Do that to a weed, it's just like, yeah, thistles, love it. Then you pluck those off, and there are like 4,000 of them pop up every time you pluck one off. So, yeah. No, hey, I don't see you plucking weeds, go for it. I'm all for that.
Well, after a rain.
Yeah, that's exactly. So I can't wait to weed tomorrow. It'll be nicer after the rains today. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you. We have guests coming quite often, and they're blown away by the institution gardens. And they really are a treasure for all of us.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that, especially this year. It has been one of our toughest springs we've had following a really rough fall, and we've just had so many different projects. And the goal for this week, by the end of this week, we will have finally been in every single one of our gardens at least once. So finally. And we decided, that on the gardens building across the way, we've had a big Christmas wreath hanging up that just came down last week. It was Christmas in July. I figured I'll just leave it up, but figure that's going to be our marker from now on. We'll just leave it up till we're all caught up. Then that's the way people will know if we're caught up or not. If the wreath is still on there, it means we're still going. But this week we finally, so we're in week 4 and we just got into every garden. So it's been, really appreciate that. The kids, the crew has been working so hard. And if you haven't been down to like the Miller Cottage Gardens, Joel Roman and Steve Stone worked along with us on that to restore all the hardscaping down there. And that garden was restored to the 1922 plans that Ellen Biddle Shipman had done for Mina Miller Edison and Thomas Edison. So it's really worth a trip down there to see. We've got about 75% of the plants in. A lot more will be going in this fall, but something to take a little wander around and see. And I know on Wednesdays at 1 o'clock they usually do, the Bird Tree Garden Club is having tours. It's $10, you buy your ticket up at the main gate, you meet at Miller Park, and then you can go through the tour. And then next year it'll be featured. Once it has all the plants, it'll be the featured garden in their house and garden tour as well. So I can't wait. It's been an opportunity of a lifetime to work on that garden, just knowing the historic aspect of it with both the Edisons as well as it being an Ellen Biddle Shipman garden. So first female landscape architect, pretty cool. Think how we're bringing that back to what it was back then. But like I said, Joe is here if there's something landscape design-wise. What I like about him and the company and what he represents, it's everything that we talked about. He looks at that sustainable side of it. And you know, as renters, thinking of those, that full season and being the ones to talk to, if you're not maintaining your own property, talking to your property maintenance people about, you know, timing of things. If you can leave it, say, hey, you know what? And it might actually save you money. You know, one, if you can use weed suppressive ground covers, cuts down on your mulch costs. Two, cuts down on a lot of the, you know, don't have them spray unless it's 100% absolutely necessary. And then if they're only cutting down things once in the spring, you know, the fall maintenance, even if it's something where they can leave the leaves on. If it's, oak leaves are the only ones that are, they tend to come off really late and they're really heavy. But just different tips and techniques. So hopefully you're able to take something from this. And my shop is just across the street. If you ever have questions, stop in.
Is moss on the roofs damaging?
It can be once it gets to a certain level because it goes up and under, gets underneath some of the different shingles. Those big words get me sometimes. Usually it's a scraping off. Yeah. I mean, there are some products that they make, but if you read, again, reading the labels of any products you have is key because it'll, a lot of times, you know, in really super fine print, it'll say, don't apply near storm drains, if there's rain within 24 hours, and that means that it's going to be detrimental somewhere down the line. So.
Cider vinegar, I've heard.
Cider vinegar, yeah, that can dry it up. And a lot of times just, if it's because you have a lot of tree canopy over, being able to air out. Same thing with your shrubs. If it's just so overgrown in the center, airing out by just removing a couple of the bigger branches on the inside, having that airflow allows it to dry out. So that it could just be as simple as having a few limbs of your tree removed. And if it's an institution tree, just let me know what property and we'll get it on our list. So, all right. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephanie and Joe, for being here today. Thank you very much. And if you see her crew on the grounds, say hello.
They love to talk.
They love to chat.
They do.
And they love to be appreciated. So, you know, we give them the chocolates a lot.
Yeah, no, I didn't find that out till just, I'm like, it's been 5 years. How did I not know this?
Joe has some cards up here if you're interested. You have a card?
Nope.
No. And I have
I'll have to bring mine down.
a couple things. We have membership cards if you haven't joined the CPOA. And there's some information about upcoming events for CPOA. And we gave John Shettle be here to talk about the Architectural Review Board. So join us now. Yes?
Picnics today.
Picnic is today for certain areas.
Email going out.
You should have seen stuff that are either happening today or tomorrow.
Depends on which area you're in. There's some rain scheduling for some they're not. But there should be an email going out this afternoon that is going to update folks on that. But there are, you know, so like areas 5 and 6 will be having the picnic.
And 9 will have it today too.
Yeah, and 7 also, and as of 12 o'clock, the forecast for 5 o'clock has improved
Oh, good.
to less rain.
Good. Well, thank you all for being here.